What's up, metalheads? Welcome to the Scrap Metal Podcast, the show for the misfits who've been listening to the same music since high school. I'm your host, John von Frankenstein, and joining me today is my metal thrashing mad co-host, Chris. Chris, I gotta ask you, man, how you feeling?
I gotta say, I'm feeling just a little bit jealous.
A little bit jealous? Oh no. Oh, jealousy. Please, don't let that ruin your day. Does this feeling of jealousy have anything to do with how you're keeping your heavy metal street cred?
You know, it might have something about how I failed to keep some heavy metal street cred,
Oh,
but
no.
my jealousy comes from some recent concerts that I didn't attend, and that I probably should have, but decided not to.
Okay.
The first of which I want to mention is Fear and the Original Misfits, who were playing out in New Jersey. That would have been a fun concert to go to. I've already seen the Misfits once before. Would love to see Fear. I know I've shared my love of Fear before on this episode. I was also really bummed AFI played with Fear and the Misfits out in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
Out here, it was someone else, but I know even at the
Five Finger Death Punch
at the show in Arizona, I know some AFI fans were not happy. Apparently, the sound quality wasn't very good. Couldn't hear Davey Havok, and we all know people want to hear their lead singers.
Oh yeah.
But the other concerts I'm very jealous I didn't go to is Metallica's No Repeat Weekend that they played at MetLife Stadium. My new senior director at work, he went to both nights. So I was very mad that he went to both nights. And I know you went to night one that Friday night.
Yeah, I went to night one. Yeah, the fucking Black Album and Load and Reload night, I guess. Fucking start off with Creeping Death, and I was like, oh, this is going to be fucking great. And then it was all Black Album and Load.
I know on Monday when I saw my senior director, he was even like, yeah, night two was definitely the better night.
They had to make up for the fact that they had fucking Ice Nine Kills and Five Finger Death Punch opening up. That's why.
It was funny talking to my director about it because I think it was Ice Nine Kills he was talking about. I see my manager and he's like, oh, you got to ask him about the show. Wait until he tells you about the band that opened up for them and like the crazy shit they were doing. I'm like, all right. So I talked to him and I'm like, oh, how's the show? He's great. It's like, yeah, Ice Nine Kills. The guy like comes out with a chainsaw and he's killing someone. I'm like, oh, that just sounds like Gwar. Like it's, that sounds perfectly normal to me.
Yeah.
But it was funny to hear my manager, who doesn't listen to any of that. Like he recently saw like Dave Matthews or something. So it's funny to hear his reaction to it. But yeah, talking to you about the first show and seeing the set list come out. Honestly, I'm kind of glad I didn't go to either night for Metallica after the fact and seeing the two set lists. Because it's kind of like, yes, night one opened up great and the rest of the set list fucking sucked. Night 2 started off like shit, but then got better and ended with, I think it ended with like Master of Puppets and Seek and Destroy or like some shit. I feel like
no, that was night one. That was night one. Yeah.
So, but I know that the two nights, if you combined the two and took out everything off of the Black Album, Load, Reload, 72 Seasons, and just kept it at that, it would have been a really fun show to see. So there was that part of me that like, yes, I would love to see Metallica live again.
Yeah.
But do I really want to go and hear them play 12 songs and only like 4 of them?
Yeah, and like, I don't know, people asked me about the show after I went, and they were like, how was it? And I was like, it was cool. It was fun. And like, I don't know. I don't want to say that I'm like desensitized to seeing Metallica live. Like, Ecstasy of Gold starts playing and I was like, yes! But I guess this is my third time seeing them. And the thing that made it cool for me is that I got to see them with my dad again. So, and then I actually realized at this show that anytime I've seen Metallica, I've seen them with my dad. So that's just become like our tradition. Yeah. So I had fun because of that. And it was a good show. They put on a good show. Our seats were, I can't complain. We got them pretty much for free. But the seats were one thing, and then the sound quality up there was another. And I mean, it is what it is, you know, but I get to carry the memory and the experience with me, and I guess that's what's more important.
Yeah.
It's not the destination, it's the ride.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
No, when you take out all like not my favorite songs, not your favorite songs, it's just one Metallica set list that was spread across 2 nights.
Yeah.
The real highlight for me was getting to see Pantera live. That was really fucking cool. That alone, I saw so many people leave after Pantera played. They didn't even stay for Metallica, which was wild. But hey, wild. I mean, that was a big fucking deal. You know, a lot of people were there to see them. I would say that I kind of share in your feeling of jealousy when I think about people that got to see them back in the heyday. And then even talking about seeing bands in their heyday, I think about every time that the original Misfits have played, I've missed the show. Whether I didn't know that it was happening, I am nowhere near where they're playing, or I was just like, do I really want to spend the fucking money? But I mean, in all honesty, I would rather go back and see them way back in the day when it was, you know, the original lineups, like when Walk Among Us had just come out. And getting to see them in their heyday, back before people hated Danzig. And I mean, maybe everyone disliked him from even back then.
I mean, yeah, that's a possibility as well, but
he's just, I mean, Danzig, like many other lead singers, seems to suffer from a very, very rare condition. It only seems to afflict about 15% of the population. This is something known as LSD, or lead singer disease. And that's our topic for today. We're going to be talking about singers who people love to hate, and whether it has more to do with ego or the fact that these guys are just plain straight up assholes. So, Chris, are you excited to get into this discussion of LSD?
I am so excited to talk about lead singer disease. You know, you always hear the stories about the egotistical lead singers and the eccentric rock stars and the crazy things that they expect or want, or just being dicks to everyone that they come into contact with.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's almost like a fun way to remind yourself that these guys that you put up on a pedestal, they're still assholes like the rest of us, you know? They're just like you and me, and get mad at people when there's a lemon in their ice water.
I mean, I guess this is where the saying "never meet your heroes" comes from, right?
Definitely.
Where it's like, these people have their own eccentricities and their own just like things that make them kind of a shitty person, you know? And it's like, we kind of forget about that when we think about the fact that it's like, oh, this is the frontman from my favorite band.
Yeah.
And that doesn't exclude them from just being a shitty person sometimes. And I also feel like when it comes to this lead singer disorder, sometimes it does have more to do with ego than them just being a straight up asshole, right? Where if you're hearing for long enough that you're such a great frontman, you're what people come to see, eventually you're going to start thinking your own shit don't stink. Yeah. And you're going to believe everything that people are saying to you, and you're going to internalize that and start acting out that expectation that everyone has of you, right? Or this kind of vision that everyone has of you in their mind. And like, it makes me think of the story that Charlie Watts told about Mick Jagger. I think there's a story where Mick Jagger ends up coming into the lobby of this hotel room doing his Mick Jagger walk, and something like an orangutan on Quaaludes. And he makes his way into the lobby.
A lot of this.
The pigeon thing. The hands on the hips, elbows way far back for our podcast listeners. You know what I'm talking about. It's the crack your back move. Yeah. So he makes his way into the lobby, and he tells someone that he's with, like, oh yeah, go fetch my drummer. So someone goes to wake up Charlie Watts, and he ends up coming downstairs, and he punches Mick Jagger in the face. And he's like, fuck you. Remember that you're my lead singer. I'm not your drummer. So it's like, you know, sometimes people have to put their singer in check.
Yeah.
And like, I'm so excited to kind of go down this rabbit hole of all these different stories and all these different singers and the impressions that people have of them, whether they're real or not. And, you know, who our favorite singers, who can be our favorites to hate, I guess you can put it, right?
Definitely.
One that comes to mind right off the bat, like we mentioned, is Danzig.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of that comes down to just diva behavior. Like I read so many different interviews and articles about, I think there was like one festival where he had claimed that it was way too cold for him to go out on stage. So he was like 45 minutes late. And then when the venue was like, hey, we're cutting off your show after 15 minutes. He was like, oh, I guess these guys never heard of a riot before. And they were like, Danzig, you're inciting riots. Please stop doing this. But like, that doesn't surprise me at all. Danzig has always struck me as a diva.
Yeah, and not to pick on him too much, but I also wonder how much of that is due to the fact that he's not very tall.
Hey, watch it.
And there is a reason that there's something called, whether it's made up or not, a Napoleon complex.
Yeah.
I wonder if how much of that is this man who is not that tall, surrounded himself with two brothers that can barely play their instruments but are like 9 feet tall, or at least wear platform boots to make themselves look 9 feet tall. Yeah. So I wonder if that's a part of it as well, and a part of him, lashing out is like he feels like he has to prove himself. Which I think is part of the reason why I always heard rumors that like in the 90s when they were going to make an X-Men movie, they wanted him to play Wolverine.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
He already kind of had the mutton chops going, and like he was more along the lines of Wolverine's stature than Hugh Jackman is. Hugh Jackman is 6'1", and so I'm not surprised that there's those rumors that they wanted him to play Wolverine. But yeah, I wonder if that's a part of it as well.
I guess so. It's like, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
If the thing is with Danzig is like, okay, Napoleon complexes aside, because I take that to heart. I think that a lot of it is that kind of confidence that one has to have to be like, oh, I took my band from nothing to something.
Yeah. When
you have the kind of rise that the Misfits did, and largely within the DIY scene.
Yep.
I was about to say FYI scene. It's easy to think to yourself like, I am responsible for all of this success, and I am the lead singer of this band, and therefore I am the reason that we are all here. I am the reason that people come to see this show. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying you can kind of see where the mindset comes from. And with someone like Danzig, who, he had his vision for what the Misfits should be, and you can hear it on Cough Cool. Like, it's very different from the horror punk that they wound up making that really helped them shoot into the stratosphere. But he always had that kind of 50s rock and roll inspiration in him. So he is largely responsible for the creation of the entire horror punk genre.
Yeah.
Anyone that makes horror punk music is just trying to do their best Danzig.
Yeah.
So it's easy to cater to that sort of ego, especially with the type of personality that he has. But then you see him go out and say, well, you know what? I want to make harder, faster, heavier music. And that's where we get Earth AD, which is basically just a fucking metal album.
Yeah.
And then he leaves that, does Samhain or Samhain, I don't know, the fucking witches are going to yell at me. And and then eventually to his own solo project, Danzig, which that first album is fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
It is. Like, credit where credit's due. That's a great fucking album. Danzig 2 and 3, not so much. But again, like when you're having all of this success, it is easy to kind of have you get enough yes people around you where it's like, yes, Danzig, you are 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
Yes, Danzig, your mutton chops are huge. Yes, Danzig, wear those boxing gloves on stage. And yeah, you can kind of see where you get someone who develops this LSD.
Yeah, and like we're saying, in the Misfits, he takes them in this direction, and they go in this direction where they're trying to get a little bit louder, a little bit heavier. But I know I even read he left because Doyle and Jerry just couldn't play to the level that he wanted the music to be at.
Right.
And so that's why he had to form Sam Hain, which eventually turned into Danzig, because he felt that they weren't putting in the effort that he expected his musicians to have. So then that's when it turned into Sam Hain and Danzig.
Quote unquote, his musicians.
Yes. Which is why Danzig became Danzig. And his idea originally was Danzig 1 is me and some musicians I like, and Danzig 2 is going to be me and a different set of musicians I like. You know, I know his original idea was to have a different band behind him on every Danzig album. I don't think...
like Ghost in Reverse.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely a good example of lead singer disease, a good first example of a lead singer who definitely sees the band as his band, and this is the direction I want to go in.
Yeah.
And you're either coming along for the ride or I'm finding someone else who will.
Yeah. Or I'm going to get into a fight with the singer of a hardcore band and get knocked out in the green room. You know, on the topic of Ghost, I know that they're one of our favorite bands, Chris and I, but I feel like Tobias Forge tends to get lumped into this group of course, they have their fans. Ghost has a huge following right now, and they're one of the most popular rock bands out there right now. But I know that there are still a large group of people who dislike Tobias for his decisions to replace certain musicians and certain lineups at certain times. But I think that is kind of like along the lines of Danzig. You are here to play as part of a collective. You know, it was never meant to be, so he says, it was never meant to be this one singular band with members that people recognize. Otherwise, they wouldn't be the Nameless Ghouls.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have these masks on to give them anonymity. But when you are putting on a production like this, where it is much more of a stage show, it's a production. Cast members on Broadway shows get replaced all the time.
Yeah.
Right? If they're right for the role, then they're right for the role. If they're not, they get replaced. And so I think that some people would probably diagnose Tobias with LSD because they think that it's just his decision because maybe he had a falling out with someone, when in reality it's, hey, this is what I need out of the band at this particular time, and this person just wasn't cutting it for the production that we're trying to put on, especially with the size of the production that they have now.
Yeah.
I don't think that the original band members, the guitarists in particular, I know that Omega was the first one to come out and basically fucking ruin all the anonymity that Ghost had. But that's more to say, I don't think that those musicians would have been able to play the style of music that they're playing now, where now the band has evolved into like this arena rock, like power ballad type of band. They're basically modeling themselves after like a Def Leppard of sorts, right?
Yeah.
In their current iteration. And it would be really hard to envision the original members playing in that style. I think that the original members fit what the band was originally, and Tobias was just looking for new members to fit the band that they've evolved into. So I don't know. I think that in that case, that's not so much LSD. I think that's someone that just had to make a really hard choice, and people are not pleased with him. What are some other examples of like lead singers that have been diagnosed with LSD where it's like, no, they just fell out with this band member?
I think a classic example, and quite possibly the poster child for LSD, would be Axl Rose.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
You know, I think as I was growing up and listening to Guns N' Roses and hearing stories about Guns N' Roses and Axl Rose, one of the first things I heard about Axl Rose was that he was notorious for not going out on stage. Yeah. And that the concert was supposed to start and it would be half hour, 2 hours before he'd finally decide to go out. And then that was when he decided to go out and perform. There were plenty of times where he would just say, "Oh, my voice isn't feeling it tonight.
Yeah.
I'm not going out there to perform." So I think that's the first symptom, we'll call it,
okay,
of Axl Rose's lead singer disease.
Does that make Axl fucking patient zero?
He might be. I mean, holy shit, he might be. An interesting story that I just read about also, and apparently there's video of it, but I didn't watch the video, is Axl Rose kicking out fans that are wearing Slash merchandise. And that...
Get out of here.
He pointed at a guy close to the stage wearing a t-shirt with Slash on it. And he's like, you, get out of here. Yeah, security, I'm pointing at that guy. Get that fucking guy out of here. And had security kick a guy out because he was wearing a Slash t-shirt.
Oh my God.
Because he fucking hates Slash, I guess.
He was the brown M&M in the audience.
Which, like, it's funny how much he hates Slash, because I also read that he tried to sue Activision for Guitar Hero 3. Allegedly, he made an agreement with them that they could use Welcome to the Jungle as long as Slash and his band at the time, Velvet Revolver, weren't in the band.
Right.
The video game comes out, Slash is on the fucking cover.
Someone at Activision was like, you know what would be really funny? We have the opportunity to do the funniest fucking thing in the world right now. Let's fucking do it.
So what happens is Axl Rose basically takes too long to sue them. And ultimately, the statute of limitations passed because apparently it was like a verbal agreement, nothing contractual.
Okay.
So that's kind of why he didn't get anything out of it. But I thought that was such a fucking, like, absurd thing. Like, it's, you hate this man so much, you're kicking his fans out of your concerts.
Ridiculous.
You're suing video game companies because his image is being used on a video game that your song is appearing in. Like, it was just so...
Can you just imagine the girl at the front desk of Activision? Sir, yeah, he says his name is Axl. No. I'm so no, he's a redhead in a kilt. I need you to come down here right now. He's really mad. God, yeah, Axl is the perfect example of a singer with LSD. And yeah, all the stories of like that diva behavior of I'm not going out because I don't feel well, or I don't like the crowd, or the conditions aren't right, or the fog machine is going too strong, or it's not cold enough, or it's too cold in the venue. Turn the ACs off. I'm looking at you, fucking Bruce Dickinson. You know, it's like... It's nuts, but on one hand, I can understand, like someone like Bruce Dickinson, I can understand someone saying the conditions for the type of singing that I do are not optimal. I need an adjustment to be made.
Yeah.
And people may see that as, you know, having lead singer disease, when in reality you're saying like, no, I've got these, 50,000 people outside waiting for me to get on stage, and they're expecting to hear me, hit that fucking note.
Yeah.
Like 19 times during the 3-hour set that I'm going to do. So I can't do that if the AC is blowing too hard, I guess. I don't know. The air is going to dry me out too much. So I think sometimes it's somewhat unfair that these guys get diagnosed with lead singer disease. But Axl Rose totally deserves it.
Definitely. One other story I want to make sure I brought up, because I think this kind of solidifies the kind of person and lead singer Axl Rose is. And I didn't realize this until about like 10 minutes before we started recording and I was doing the research. But in Montreal in 1992, Guns N' Roses was touring with Metallica when James Hetfield had the accident where the pyro went off during Fade to Black.
We call it the Michael Jackson accident. The pyro went off and burned half his face.
Yeah, he was set on fire, and thankfully his guitar was able to take the brunt of it, and he survived and got out of it, not unscathed, but he survived. They were the openers for Guns N' Roses. And so this happens. I don't even know how soon into the set this was, but I feel like it was early in the set. This happens. Kirk is like, look, we can't fucking play. Like, my lead singer and rhythm guitarist just got set on fire. Like, we're not performing.
Yeah.
And so Axl Rose and Guns N' Roses have an opportunity to be like, all right, well then let's just play a whole bunch more music than we originally did, which shout out to Testament all those years ago when I saw them when they recorded their Dark Roots of Thrash DVD. Overkill was supposed to perform at that show, and couldn't because Bobby Blitz had like pneumonia or something.
Yeah.
And so instead of Testament being like, well, we're just going to play the, 12-song set that we originally planned on, they're like, well, then we're just going to double our set list because we have more time since Overkill isn't playing. So Axl Rose and Guns N' Roses could have done that. Instead, Axl Rose was like, no, I'm not going out until I was originally scheduled to. And then he was saying that he wasn't feeling right in his voice. And then they go out and played like 8 songs. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm not feeling it. And just like shuts the set down. And there's a fucking riot. And I saw a quote from Jason Newsted. Like, Axl Rose walks into the green room like, oh yeah, my voice is all fucked up tonight. As he's drinking and smoking. And he's like, no wonder your voice is fucked up, you fucking moron. And especially at this point, I'd imagine Jason knows what James went through with the Black Album, how he started to needed voice lessons because his voice was going. And he watches this fucking shithead walk in, smoking cigarettes, complaining about how he can't sing. So for the first...
Meanwhile, their lead singer's literally still on fire.
Yeah, he's in the hospital still on fire. And for the first time ever, I'm on Jason Newsted's side. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, it's...
Yeah.
You talk about lead singer disease. That's like shitty person disease.
Yeah. And that's... I mean, I mentioned it at the top of the episode. I feel like some people get diagnosed with LSD because they just happen to be, kind of full of themselves. I think that as a lead singer, you have to have a certain level of confidence.
Absolutely.
You're the one that is at the forefront of the stage. You're literally the front man. It's in the name. But there has to be, you have to have this air of confidence. It's almost like professional athletes. Yeah. You don't become an all-star. What's the quarterback? There you go. Without enough people around you being like, you are fucking great. Yeah. You are so fucking good. And then eventually some people, it gets to their head and their ego gets inflated. And that the same thing happens with lead singers, where you've got some lead singers that are in huge bands that are super fucking humble, and then other ones who decide like, no, the pizza on my fucking rider was not right, so I'm not going out. Yeah. And I love that video of James. It must have been on this same tour. James is reading Guns N' Roses or Axl's personal rider. Yeah. And it was like 1 sirloin steak, 1 T-bone, like whatever, 14 ounces of filet mignon. I can't fucking speak today. You know what? Podcast done. I can't fucking get my words out. That's it. Cutting the fucking episode off right here.
At least no one had to be set on fire for this to happen.
Well, you know what? You spoke too soon. So all of that to say is that I just think there's a difference between having lead singer disease, where some of it has to do with ego and confidence, and just being an outright shitty person. There are so many lead singers who have been outed as shitty people, or who have been like just generally recognized as shitty people, and just shitheads, all together. Yeah. Chris, I know that you're a huge, huge fan of the Dead Kennedys, but I know that their lead singer often gets lumped into this group of singers with LSD.
Yeah, definitely. Jello Biafra is a character, to say the least.
Yeah.
And according to Jello, he is pretty much the brainchild and created Dead Kennedys. I think very much him and Glenn Danzig think of themselves in the same way in relation to their band. And I think similar to Glenn Danzig, Jello Biafra has also been in legal disputes with former members of Dead Kennedys. I know the big thing that happened was that he was sued for unpaid royalties due to an accounting error that apparently he was aware of and just didn't tell anyone. And then tried to act like he wasn't paid. And then someone, like the company, came back with like, no, we have your signature on the cashed checks. Like, you got paid. And so he had to, pay this money back. And I know a lot of it came down to, which he's not an asshole for this, but he didn't want Holiday in Cambodia to be used in a Levi's commercial because he was against their, practices and their alleged use of sweatshops. I think him having say over that got the rest of the band to be like, well, wait, what about the rest of us? Like,
right.
aren't we owed something somewhere? And that's what led to the lawsuit, and he had to pay it. And it's in his post-dead Kennedy's career. Jello is definitely someone who has released, some spoken word stuff and some weird stuff that people just like to kind of make fun of him for. But I know one thing that is a bummer, in my opinion, is that in this lawsuit, the rights of the band and the name and the music all just got given to the band. So whether he really was the creative force in the band all those years ago, or whether he was just claiming that, he doesn't get anything from it now. And so, like, that sucks. But at the same time, if you had just, like, treated these people like human beings and paid them, you wouldn't be in this situation now.
Right. Yeah, he brought it upon himself. He brought it upon himself, and it is a really shitty situation, but there were other people hurt because of decisions that he made before that.
Yeah. And then tried to blame someone else, which is probably the worst part,
That's called gaslighting, the word of 2023. I feel like Jello Biafra, I don't want to put him in the same boat as Johnny Rotten, but because Johnny Rotten's just a fucking you talk about being a character, holy shit. But I feel like Johnny Rotten absolutely, or John Lydon absolutely has lead singer disorder or lead singer disease, because he's just a shithead. He's a piece of shit. And the thing is, the Sex Pistols was the project of a particular producer, and he basically put them together like a boy band. And are they influential and are they important in music history? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Johnny Rotten just thought that it was his band and that he came up with the idea and that he is the one who invented punk rock. When in reality, it's like, no, you are basically Joey Fatone and you are out there singing, in front of this band that was put together to have the appearance of a punk rock band, to have the appearance of someone who's an anarchist and all this stuff. And like, I don't know. It's just someone, I don't want to say that he deserves a lot of the ire that's been thrown his way for many, many years, but he kind of does, Like, I feel like a lot of times we rag on someone like Dave Mustaine constantly.
Yeah.
Constantly. Any listeners of the show, new viewers, this by now. But it's more so we're just, or I should say, I'm just not a fan of Megadeth's music.
Yeah.
We are not a fan of his vocals. But I think the reason why people think Mustaine has LSD is just because he's always fucking doing this. He's always fucking yapping.
Yep.
And he loves to talk about Metallica, and he loves to talk about how much better he is than Metallica, and he loves to talk about all this shit that happened 40 fucking years ago.
Yeah.
Now, did he deserve to get kicked out of the band the way he did? Maybe not. But, they were all, in their 20s? So maybe that's the best way that they saw to get rid of a member who was constantly causing fights and, drinking 10 times more than the rest of them were and just could not play. So maybe it's somewhat unfair because I'm not a fan of his music or his fucking Roger Klotz voice, but he does it to himself because he just fucking yaps about anything and everything, Metallica especially.
Yeah.
Whether I like Metallica or not is not even the issue. It's he brings it upon himself. He almost paints the target on himself because he just constantly wants to be talking about other people.
Yeah, that's really what it is that I get it. You're pissed off. They re-recorded songs you wrote and you're not getting credit for it. Which I think he was getting credit for it. It's just in the fans' eyes, maybe he's not getting credit for it. Legally, he's getting credit for it.
Or you know what? Because there's a lot of fans that will be like, well, actually, Kirk just recorded a bunch of Dave solos on the first two albums. It's like the fans are totally aware.
Yeah.
You don't have to constantly remind them at every fucking opportunity.
And that's definitely where it gets to be. And then plus I think you add onto it, for us at least, the fact that we find his voice to be so fucking annoying.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I will regularly think about Lane Staley doing his impression. Watch him become a god. Like, I regularly think about that. And it's
trying to teach my son to do that.
And like, I think for me, it's, if it weren't for Dave Mustaine, I'd like Megadeth because some of the music is really good. His voice is really fucking annoying. And so that's why I can't do it. And then it's almost like it makes me think of how, at least in my groups of friends, and maybe I'm just a bully, but in my groups of friends, there's always been that one guy that kind of makes it easy to make fun of them. And typically they take it in stride, you know. It's because every once in a while I do something stupid and I get it and I'm like, I deserve it, you know. And I feel like of the big four, Dave Mustaine is the one who's just the easiest to make fun of because, like you said, he's always talking. He's giving you so much ammunition to work with. And I think that's what it really is that when you come off as, you know, the bitter ex-girlfriend who just won't shut the fuck up, like, people are gonna fucking make fun of you because
whether it's deserved or not.
Yeah. But it's like, and I've heard people make the comparison. I think I've even made the comparison on this podcast, to get kicked out of a band that has been regularly referred to as alcoholica for drinking too much. Yeah. How much were you fucking drinking? And I think the other thing that adds on top of that is that if I remember correctly, and it also could have just been Lars or James talking shit because it was at a time when Dave was talking shit. But the way they tell the story, it almost sounded like it was Lars and James's band, and they wanted a lead guitarist, and they saw Dave Mustaine performing with the most expensive equipment they've ever seen, and thought, wow, that my guy must be great. Look at all the shit he's got. And that's why they brought him in, and they didn't really, it's not like they were friends with him or they knew him really well. It was almost just like, hey, this guy's a great guitarist, let's bring him in. And then he turned out to not be someone they wanted to hang out with and kicked him out.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, I mean, I think that's fair. I think it's fair to say that he invites the criticism and he invites the hate, I guess, you know, from people. I don't know. It's just, it seems so childish to me. You know, like you've got people like David Lee Roth, right? Which is a prime example of lead singer disease.
Yes.
You've got people like Gene Simmons, another prime example of LSD. And they often get people talking shit about them and just saying, you know, that they're terrible and that they're full of themselves. But between someone like David Lee Roth and, you know, Gene Simmons and Dave Mustaine, I think it's just, the difference is the fucking yapping.
Yeah.
It's they bring it upon themselves. So I think there's a reason why people think that Gene is a dick. I think there's a reason that people think that Mustaine is an asshole. Where David Lee Roth, it's just like, dude just wanted to do fucking splits on stage, man.
Yeah.
He just wanted to fucking party. I wish I had my fucking Pit Vipers so I could like honor fucking Diamond Dave with the fucking Pit Vipers. Oh man, I wish we were fucking recording video back then when I did the fucking Randy Savage impression. Just side note for anyone, go back and listen to our fucking wrestling episode if you want to find out what that fucking reference is about. But okay, if we're sticking on the trajectory of lead singers with annoying voices, I personally am a huge fan of this band, but I know that many people are not a fan of their lead singer, and that's Cradle of Filth and their singer Danny Filth. I constantly hear people talking about like how much they can't stand him because he's very much full of himself. But like, kind of like Danzig, the impression has always been this was Danny Filth's band, and he is employing musicians to create the sound that he wants. I think the reason that people think he's an asshole is his treatment of previous band members. So it's like, it's one thing to be like a Tobias Forge and be like, hey, sorry, you just don't fit what the band needs right now. And then purportedly right? Supposedly.
Yeah.
Basically just like bullying ex-members and kind of just dragging their name through the dirt. Like, again, this is all just, a lot of this comes from previous members who, of course, when there's bad blood there, you might not be getting the whole story. You might not be getting the full picture of everything. But by all accounts, he's kind of a shitty guy. And like, I hate to put that out there on this fucking podcast about anybody, you know? I mean, I guess here's the thing. With an episode like this, we very much walk the line of like, hey, we're not inviting anyone to go hate on these people. We're just trying to discuss this phenomenon of lead singers being too big for their britches, right? And like too cool for school. And Danny Filth, it feels like he just fits that bill perfectly. I don't know how much research or looking into Cradle of Filth you've done, but do you get that same sort of impression?
Just from you and Anna Spooks. You know, I know she mentioned
Anna's got firsthand experience. Apparently, I should have asked her on the show again.
I know she mentioned Danny Filth when we had her on, but it's I think Cradle of Filth is a band that I've thought I should listen to, but the only song I've still only ever heard is their cover of the Misfits' "Death Comes Ripping." That's still the only Cradle of Filth song I've listened to.
Yeah, that's a great fucking cover, by the way.
Oh yeah, totally.
But yeah, I just feel like that's what, when people say like, don't meet your idols. Yeah. I feel like they're talking about Danny Filth. And again, I think that a lot of it ends up coming from previous members who maybe feel that they're not getting their royalties, which is a common thing, right? Amongst rock stars and amongst bitter exes, like you put it. Yeah. But I think you cross a line when you start to try and assassinate someone's character. You know, when they're out there and like they're still actively a musician, trying to work with other bands, trying to work within the scene, trying to do whatever within the music industry. When you're having a former, employee or employer, talk shit about you, you're getting a shitty reference no matter where you go. Yeah. So, and the question is that deserved? So I guess for those reasons, you can say that Danny Filth has LSD. And he has that air of confidence and ego, like Danzig, like Dave Mustaine, like an Axl Rose. I guess it's just, it comes back to when you treat people badly, the story's going to get out there. Yeah. It's what goes around comes around. And I think that's kind of what he's fallen victim to. Chris, do you have any other lead singers that we should be scanning with a forehead thermometer to see if they've fallen ill with LSD? I know we've briefly mentioned him already, but I thought it would be fun to talk about David Lee Roth for a bit. Because, I think similar to Axl Rose, the thing you often hear about the eccentric rock star is, the story about Van Halen and in their rider specifying they want a bowl of M&Ms, but no brown M&Ms. They want all the brown M&Ms taken out. And that's always been thrown around as an example of the eccentric rock star asking for impossible tasks and things like that. And at Cambodian breast milk and all that shit. Yeah, just asking for the most absurd things. And then you hear David Lee Roth tell the story. It's like, well, the reason we did that was because our rider included instructions for our stage displays and our stage show, and we had a lot of shit going on stage. And so the easiest way for us to tell if our instructions had been followed is if we walk into the green room and there's a bowl of M&Ms and there's brown M&Ms in it, we know that our instructions were not followed. And so I'm not going out on stage until I know all of the instructions were followed. And so if they walk in, the bowl has no brown M&Ms, they know that every single instruction has been followed, including the absurd instruction of no brown M&Ms. And so that's the story David Lee Roth has always told. Is the reason why they did that. It's justice for Dave. Yeah, like it's justice for Diamond Dave. I will never forgive Gene Simmons for bullying David Lee Roth into fucking retirement. Whether his voice is gone or not, whether he did a stint with a fucking bluegrass band or not, doing a cover of Jump. I saw that fucking video recently. That was a fucking trip. I fucking love David Lee Roth, man.
Yeah, it's, he's, and I didn't go into anything else that he's done, and I'm sure he's done other shit. He was a rock star in the late 70s. Who God only knows what those guys were doing. But it's, in this particular case, I thought it would be fun to talk about how, like, something that's always attributed as, like, another reason why this guy is, lead singer disease and, this egotistical, oh, I don't eat the brown M&Ms. There better not be, I'm not going out on stage unless all the brown M&Ms are taken out of my bowl of M&Ms. It's like, no, he actually had a really good reason for not wanting to go out on stage if there were brown M&Ms in his bowl. So I think it was something interesting that I wanted to bring up because I thought it brought in an interesting idea and an interesting topic of almost like a musician or lead singer, like leaning into that egotistical side and stereotype to be like, I want to make sure things are done right.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna let them think that I'm a giant asshole, and they're gonna be cursing me the whole time that they're picking out brown M&Ms, but at least I know I'll feel safe when I go out on stage, and I know we're going to be putting on a great show for our audience because this shows that the venue cared about giving the artist what they wanted, no matter how fucking absurd it was.
Yeah. Chris, I feel like we had a really difficult job this episode. We were walking a really fine line between basically just tearing down heroes and being like, wait a minute, no, we're not actually trying to tell you not to listen to this music. So much so that I feel like some people might even diagnose us with PBD or podcast bro disease. But Chris, what are your thoughts on this very fine line that we had to walk while discussing lead singer disease?
First of all, if I'm going to be diagnosed with podcast bro disease, wait at least until I start talking about my crypto, all right?
Fucking pee-pee poo-poo coin, dude. It's fucking great, bro.
But you're right. We definitely walked a fine line, and I think it is important that we let the audience know that every band I've mentioned today, Glenn Danzig and the Misfits, Guns N' Roses with Axl Rose, Jello from Dead Kennedys, these are some of my all-time favorite bands. I love these bands. I love these guys as singers and what they've done musically and what they've done as artists. There is there is that idea of wanting to separate the art from the artist. Obviously, that gets way more challenging when you get into black metal. That's a very different conversation. But I think today we're not trying to tear these guys down. We're not talking about stuff about these guys that people don't already know. These are all things that I Googled 20 minutes before we hit record. So these things are very easy to find about these guys, and it doesn't really change my opinion about these guys as singers, as artists. Would I want to hang out with them, at a party? Maybe, maybe not. But they're still the lead singers of some of my all-time favorite bands. And so Danzig's kind of a jerk to Jerry and Doyle. Like, that's not gonna... They've clearly made up enough to perform live now, Didn't Axl Rose, didn't Guns N' Roses kind of sort of reunite and perform a bunch of shows? So it's, we're pointing out that these guys are jerks every once in a while, but I think, who isn't?
Yeah. Us included.
Yeah. See, every single time we've made fun of Dave Mustaine.
And with that, Chris, what is your suggestion for this week?
So my suggestion this week is Metallica's first album, Kill 'Em All. This is a great album where you can hear Kirk Hammett playing all of Dave Mustaine's solos, and you can hear James Hetfield playing all of Dave Mustaine's riffs. But this is a great fucking album, a great debut of a once great band. The opening track is phenomenal. Hit the Lights. You've got Motor Breath. You've got the Four Horsemen that was turned into Mechanics. You've got Whiplash. You've got Seek and Destroy. The entire album is just incredible. And so I'm sure anyone listening to this, or I would hope anyone listening to this, has already listened to and fallen in love with Kill 'Em All. But if you haven't, and you do call yourself a Metallica fan, please go out, check out their first album, Kill 'Em all the way back from 1983. It's chock full of phenomenal songs. There's a reason they closed every show with Seek and Destroy for like a decade. So definitely go out, check out that album.
That's an awesome suggestion. So yeah, pretty much if you liked night 1 of Metallica's No Repeat Weekend, go listen to Kill 'Em All. So my suggestion for this week is an album from my favorite diminutive frontman, someone who I clearly see eye to eye with, height-wise anyway. Someone who no one gets punched in a hallway like Glenn Danzig. And so my suggestion for this week is Danzig's debut album with his solo band, Danzig. This album's fucking great. It's awesome. It's so deserving of all the praise that it's gotten for years and years and years prior. Twist of Cain is a great opener. Not of This World feels like you're riding a fucking motorcycle. Like it's such a cool fucking... I don't think that Danzig rides motorcycles though, right? His feet would dangle when he's sitting in the seat, wouldn't they? And of course, the track that everyone knows and loves, Mother. But my favorite fucking song on this album is Am I Demon? This song is fucking great. It is so fucking good. So if you are a fan of Short Kings, go out and listen to Glenn Danzig's album, Danzig, from the band Danzig. Remember, listeners, Nancy Reagan would want you to say no to lead singer disease. And with that, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Scrap Metal Podcast. The time has come for us to pack up our gear, but we'll be back to rock out with you in the next episode.
Stay metal, everyone.
Good night!